When people think of F.W. Murnau, they tend to think of his 1922 film Nosferatu, and I'm no exception. That's the first movie that comes to mind when I hear his name. But I think his 1924 film The Last Laugh is one of the best films of the 1920s, one of the best silent films, and I personally found it to be life-changing. If you've been watching this series of movies that changed my life videos and you've seen The Last Laugh, you probably already understand why this movie means so much to me, because there are a lot of overlapping ideas between other movies I talked about and this one. But spoiler alert for The Last Laugh, even though this movie is 100 years old, so you've had 100 years to watch this movie. The Last Laugh is essentially a movie about a hotel doorman losing his job. I know that doesn't exactly sound riveting, but I believe this film had a massive impact on film history, and Murnau implements one of my favorite types of movie endings, and to see that in 1924 was just kind of mind-blowing to me. It's also one of the best examples of visual storytelling. There's only one title card in the whole movie, and it might be the most impactful one I've ever seen. Although depending on which version you watch, technically there's this at the beginning that reads, "Today you are the first, respected by all, a minister, a general, maybe even a prince. Do you know what you will be tomorrow?" So this doorman is really proud of his work. He clearly loves his job, and he's just a really friendly person. He even stops to defend and comfort a kid that was being bullied. He just goes out of his way to be nice to people, and all of that is communicated to the viewer visually. But his manager decides that he's getting too old and demotes him to a bathroom attendant. He doesn't even tell him. He gives him a letter, and the letter says that since he worked there for so many years, they created an open position for him by sending their oldest employee to a shelter, and they flat out say they demoted him because of his old age. This is still relevant today because I keep hearing about people finding out they're losing their jobs via email, not even a phone call, and I keep hearing about ageism in the job market. So our protagonist is devastated. He tries to hide it from his friends and family, even going so far as to stealing his uniform so he can come home wearing it so his wife won't know. But eventually someone finds out and the word spreads. Not only is he ashamed of his demotion, but everyone mocks him and acts like he lied to them the entire time about his job as if he was never a doorman at all. Everyone is really cruel to him. His wife leaves him. Seeing the stark contrast in the way people treat him after his demotion really shows that people place too much of an emphasis on jobs, which I also think is extremely relevant today. Obviously, you need money to survive, so you need a job, but a person's job shouldn't define them. The man didn't stop being a kind person because he got demoted. He doesn't deserve to be ridiculed. So he goes back to the bathroom where he works, and the night watchman at the hotel is the only person who shows him any sort of kindness. When the night watchman sees him fall asleep in the bathroom, he covers him with his coat. Eventually, we get that one title card that reads, "Here, at the place of his humiliation, the old man would waste away miserably for the rest of his life. And here the story would, strictly speaking, be over. But the author is looking out for him, who has been abandoned by everyone. And so he bestows upon him an epilogue telling a story that, unfortunately, usually doesn't occur in real life." I love endings like this because I prefer movies to be realistic, but I like when they come up with creative ways to still technically give us a happy ending. Sometimes you want to watch a movie to distract yourself from how bleak life can be, so you want that happy ending even though you know it's completely unrealistic, because you just want to pretend and give yourself a little glimmer of hope. So I love that the movie acknowledges the painful reality of the situation, but also gives us the fantasy of a happy ending, while acknowledging that that's not how it works in real life. Because of this, I don't know if people would consider The Last Laugh an uplifting movie or a depressing movie. I think it's a bit of both. In this epilogue, we see people in the hotel reading a newspaper and laughing. Eventually, we see the headline, which tells us that someone inherited a fortune because a multimillionaire died in the bathroom of the hotel. And in his will, he said that if he dies in someone's arms, that person would be the sole heir to his fortune. It's already obvious where this is going, but the buildup is so great. The newspaper reads, "The biblical promise that the last shall be the first seems already to have been fulfilled on earth, for the lucky one is." And then the camera moves through the restaurant of the hotel, and then it stops at this big table with all this fancy food before eventually revealing the protagonist's face, and it's just so satisfying. Cinematographer Carl Freund's camera work was so innovative. He's credited with introducing the unchained camera technique in this film. Being able to move the camera around instead of keeping it on a tripod was groundbreaking and had a pretty big impact on film history. So our protagonist inherits this fortune, and he's having a fancy dinner at the hotel, and his guest is the night watchman who was nice to him when everyone else made fun of him. He goes to the bathroom and tips the new attendant very generously, smokes a cigar with him, and encourages other guests to tip. On the way out of the hotel, he tips everyone who works there. Then he and the night watchman get into this fancy horse-drawn carriage. A man approaches them and begs for money, and he invites the beggar to join them in the carriage. And then they ride off happily. Now, I loved this movie even before I lost my job, but it's only after revisiting it now that I realize how much it resonates with me. I keep making jokes about how I need a billionaire to just give me some money, or how I need to win the lottery, which I think annoys a lot of people because that's not realistic, but that's the only reason why I'm willing to joke about it. And I wasn't prepared to be unemployed in such a horrible job market, and I hate asking people for help, but obviously I reached a point where I had to get over that. And in doing so, I witnessed a lot of people who were in positions where they could actually help, claim they wanted to help, and act like they were trying, but they didn't. And I've had people who aren't in positions where they could help actually try really hard to help me even though they couldn't. For example, a few friends sent me so many job listings even if they worked in different industries and didn't have connections at those companies, and they'd try to ask around on my behalf. But I've also had former coworkers send me job listings for the companies they work for. Just the regular job listing that I already had access to, when it would have taken an extra 2 minutes to refer me instead of just sending me the listing. And a couple of them even said they knew someone on the hiring team, and I'd be like, great, can you connect us or refer me or something? And they didn't. They just sent the job listing that I already saw and already applied for, so they did the bare minimum. Also, just to clarify, I've also had former coworkers refer me for positions and introduce me to people. I'm just thinking of a few people who claimed they wanted to help, could have helped, and didn't. And it's just this juxtaposition of seeing that compared to the people who actively wanted to help but weren't in positions to do so. And I just keep thinking, if I somehow won the lottery or inherited a fortune from some multimillionaire who dies in a hotel bathroom, I'd remember the people who wanted to help but couldn't. And I'd try to help them out because I'd finally be in a position to do so. I also always think about how easy it would be to make a huge difference in someone else's life if I were rich. Like, there are people who have more money than they know what to do with, and they're set for life, and their families are set for life. And some of them just hoard that wealth. If they're doing things that create jobs, that's a different story. But even if they don't, they have the ability to change someone's entire life without even making a noticeable dent in their bank account. Like, imagine being so rich you could help fix other people's problems for fun, or even just using that money to make someone else's day. This is such a small example compared to what I'm envisioning, but I remember one time I went to a concert and I ended up with an extra VIP ticket, and for some reason I wasn't able to sell the ticket, so it was a financial loss, and I had already accepted that. And I could have just done nothing and pretended I never wasted money on that ticket, but I went to the front of the line for general admission for that concert, where people had been waiting outside for hours and still had hours to go before the show because they wanted to get as close to the stage as possible. And I asked who was the biggest fan of the band, and multiple people pointed to the same person. And I was like, do you want to meet the band? And I gave that person the VIP ticket. I know it's not that big of a deal, but it was really cool to be able to do something like that for someone else, that it totally made up for the fact that I lost money off that ticket. And if you're thinking I should have went to the front of the line and tried to sell the ticket, you're missing my point. If I could afford to do stuff like that all the time, I would, because it just feels good to do something for someone else, even if you're not getting anything in return. But too bad now I can't even afford to buy a general admission ticket for myself. But basically my dream would be to live out that nonsensical epilogue from The Last Laugh. Besides being groundbreaking on a technical level, this movie is just a powerful reminder to be kind to people and that we're more than our jobs.